another marvelous night in May, and we are gathered together for our second group of presentations. I don't think we don't need motions and agendas. Great.
If you do, I'll make that.
And I don't
You
think
can later fill in the blanks, but I don't believe so.
great. I don't think we do. We are making one slight change to the agenda, and that is that the city attorney is going to go first and talk about their budget. And we have Justin here, and then we will go in the order in which it's been up on board docs.
Okay.
So, without further ado, let us dive in. Justin.
Perfect. Deputy City Attorney Justin St. James, just going to give a little overview so folks have an understanding of the City Attorney's Office overall, and the sort of 30,000-foot view is our budget is largely unchanged from last year, but I'll just walk through a little bit to give folks the background. As you can see, we have 6 attorneys. Currently, City Attorney is vacant, hoping to have one soon. We have otherwise 5 attorneys, a deputy, director of litigation, Kim Sturdivant, and 3 wonderful assistant city attorneys, paralegal, Lisa Jones, a legal assistant, and a public information officer. So that's sort of the full staffing is 9 folks, and we're currently at 8, so almost back to full staffing. Just a little background. So City Attorney's Office is sort of in-house general counsel for all city departments and projects. There are certain exceptions where there's either conflict counsel hired to represent boards or a city council, which has happened occasionally when the city's attorney's office is handling representation for departments, certainly contested cases, or if there's a sort of unique issue. But generally, the city attorney's office is in-house counsel. There are certain matters such as electric utility regulation, certain utility matters, airport regulation, bankruptcy, environmental matters where they're so issue specific, they are handled by outside counsel. Those issues are fairly sparse, but we certainly have a pool of very talented folks who help us out. Additionally, if there are claims against the city that basically trigger the city's insurance defense policies, those are handled by a range of outside counsel as well. And there's certainly wonderful bond counsel to help us on complex bond issues. Just a brief overview, but this is a representation of firms used in the last fiscal year for various matters, everything from insurance defense to commercial real estate transactions to bond counsel to legislative representation. The city has an RFP process and it has various arrangements in terms of making sure we have very competent, qualified counsel to help us in matters which sort of tread outside our normal expertise areas. And just a little more breakdown. Generally, city departments have a primary attorney. For instance, DPW has the wonderful Tim Devlin. Permitting inspections has Kim Sturdivant. Those attorneys help them usually everything from RFPs and contracting to daily issues that arise within the sort of departmental purview. And it helps to have basically help have that in-house counsel for each department. And I think the departments, the feedback we get is they find it helpful as well. And then we also have task specific items such as I'm the elections attorney, Kim handles planning commission. And so we try and create opportunities for both people to broaden their sort of professional skill set and horizons with things that interest them, as well as just needing to staff all of the important matters that come before the city. And certainly public records, our office is the main sort of repository of public records requests, and they need to be fulfilled that generally have a legal aspect to them, as well as parking ticket appeals. Then just a little more, all city contracts, all RFPs are reviewed or prepared by an attorney. Certainly all resolutions and motions go through our office, and when it does happen, all employee discipline, discharge, sort of HR matters, our office helps the wonderful HR department. Just a few big picture items. Obviously, I keep using the word wonderful because it seems fitting, but we are eager to find someone to fill Dan Richardson's large shoes. Process is ongoing now. And then a few larger items are going to be continuously reviewing city ordinances and charter provisions, making sure we're updating where possible, certainly in case of ordinances, to reflect sort of the times and the current realities on the ground for the city. Certainly we are looking forward to getting back to full staffing, because when we do have short staffing scenarios, it does just place a higher workload on individual attorneys. And we're going to continue, especially, I'd say Tim Devlin especially, but we have some great attorneys working to standardize practices and procedures in a way that makes the department and the city better. We're going to keep helping departments in that effort this year. As I sort of tipped off at the beginning, this is a budget that is almost entirely similar to the FY22 budget. There is very small reductions in ways that will not affect any of the services provided by our department, the largest being outside counsel line, which we think will not be an issue to accommodate that due to sort of anticipated workload and projects ongoing. Oh, wow. That's it.
So that's it.
Are there specific items that I can address in our budget, or questions about anything I presented?
What's the line was the outside counsel? There's sort of two lines, there's professional consultant services, is that outside counsel?
Yes, sorry, yes, it is. 6,500, 106.
And then there's 115, is that different?
Yeah, that has been historically, if the city knew that it was going to be engaging in arbitration, for instance, it has always been a separate line item, although I'll be honest, when arbitration's arisen in the last several fiscal years, it's been paid out of the 106 versus 115. So I'm not sure if that is a bit of a historical legacy piece for the, it hasn't been filled since the 2020 with the actual amount. So might be something we think about, but I think it has been, if the city really, if we knew that we had a specific discrete arbitration matter coming up, that we might want to set aside funds for that.
Now, are there additional outside legal fees not shown here that might be, the enterprise funds might have, or something like the TIF district, or is this some total of the outside counsel?
There could be outside counsel within other certain departments, but this is handling largely, some items that come to our office where we're representing other departments. Certainly BED, for instance.
That's exactly right, Councilor Carpenter. Anything that is budgeted outside of the general fund is budgeted within those budgets.
So if we look at their
Yes,
departmental budgets, then we would see their
that's right.
legal expenses.
Yes.
But do you still oversee that, or how is that handled?
Yeah, so our office takes generally the role of coordinating outside counsel and working with outside counsel just to make sure that there's sort of continuity of service within the department, even if the expertise is held there. The city generally tries to play a role with that.
But within the departmental budgets, the legal fees can be sort of a mixed bag, because some departments have a lot more general fund than other departments. So how do you, I'm just curious, and how much is general fund versus paid for by fees or bonds or financings? Yes.
It kind of depends on what's happening during that year. But I would say, we could certainly get you that. I'm not sure we have those figures, because the way we think about it is very general fund centric, and I'm not comparing that against what BED or the airport's line is, but if that's interesting to you, then certainly move forward with that. Usually we're just tracking what the general fund expenses are, and then we're looking at the airport compared to what the airport spent last year or what BED spent last year, not necessarily compared to what the general fund expenditure is.
Do we keep track of all of the expenses by vendor? By law firm in this case, actually.
That is something we can do. It is not something we routinely look at it in that way. Counselor Hightower and then President Paul.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Which, to dig a little bit into the budget, because the presentation didn't quite cover, I guess, some of the budget figures. And this is more, I guess the first question is for CEO Shad, which is the 2020 actual amount. As I've been digging into that, I assume, are we just using the 2020 actual amount as kind of our pre-COVID figure because it ended like shortly after COVID, or can you just making, like, I guess in these budget presentation in terms of us getting a pre-COVID understanding, are we assuming that is the 2020 actual, or?
We are actually using FY19 if we need if we're using a comparison year, for instance, for revenues that we're looking to normalize. We've talked about that is looking at FY19 revenues with 3% added on in FY20, 21, and 22. So we are looking at FY19 as more of the comparison. And your next question is probably, why am I not seeing that? You are not seeing that because of a very simple technological reason, and that is we have run out of columns in New World that can show up in a report. So I could get you FY19 and then skip FY20 and then get you 21 and 22, but I can't do 19, 20, 21, 22, and then budget it for 23. So it's just simply a strange New World issue here that we're facing.
Yeah, I think I would prefer to have, and I don't know if you can choose to cut out a budget, but I'm okay with the 2021 amended budget. If I was going to lose one, I think that would be the one that I would pick, just because it's nice to have the actuals, and then I think having the 2019 actuals I think would be nice for us. And then the other question that I have that I'm just gonna ask in all the presentations, so it'd actually be great if and I know that this is everybody's kind of, I'm sure, scrambling to get these presentations made, but as we're talking about the cut that departments are making, it looks like we're saying the city attorney's office was too painful to cut. Is that correct in my understanding of what I'm seeing?
I'll let Justin speak next, but there were cuts made to the city attorney's budget, but those cuts were made to the outside counsel line, and because we're hoping, I think, to have bargaining wrapped up and thinking that it will not affect operations this year. So a cut was made, but not a cut that we feel will have a lot of cause operational distress. Justin, anything to add?
Yeah, there were a few other smaller items, but I think, yeah, we were given sort of, the question is where could we cut without sort of deleterious effects on services? So I think that's what we sort of provided back.
And as you can imagine, just to add to that, the city attorney's proportion of the $2.2 million cut as a very small budget was a very small portion of cuts. So that's perhaps why it's not jumping out to you in the budget. Anything
Got
else?
it. Yeah, sorry. Just to close on that, I guess is, and I just opened the budget, so it also could also just be, but it looks, I guess, it looks to me like the 2023 is higher than the 2022. So are we doing the 2% cut off of the 2022, or was it off of like what originally we had budgeted for 2023?
It was not from what was originally 2023. It was from the 2021 budget.
Got it. Okay. Yep. Nope, still higher. Oh, the 2021 actuals, you mean?
I am pulling it up.
Sorry, I just figure I want to get correct. I want to get an understanding of the whole framework. I know this is day 2 and should have asked those earlier, but I had to hop off early on the last call, the last presentations. And if I'm just missing something or looking at the wrong line, but I think I'm looking at expenses total, which I assume is the right.
You are, we have also increased revenues, but you are correct that overall, it looks like there is a. Yes, let me just share this. Looking at here.
But they might keep you up in the last.
Okay.
But like, if they predict.
It's hard to see here, but here we have our 22 amended budget with an expense of 1.2 million, and the 23 department requested is just about the same. So it appears that something has perhaps gotten crossed, some wires have gotten crossed, because I think there originally there was a slight cut here. So that's certainly something that we're happy to revisit. As you can see, we're up a little bit on revenues, but all told, that is only an $18,000 cut.
We cut out general operating and it looks like personnel. That's where we're at.
Yeah, it's personnel. Because it just.
Got it. Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Yeah, and sorry for this line of questioning. I'm just certainly not advocating that the city attorney's office in particular be cut. I think I just wanted to make sure that I understood how each one of this is affecting each of the departments. So great, thank you. That's helpful.
President Paul.
Thanks. In 21 and in 22, the actual amount is far less than the amended amount when it comes to revenue. So it would seem as though, aren't you creating the same possibility into 23?
We could be. I can tell you that we have not finished collecting revenue for 22. This is interdepartmental revenue. And so I know that my office is a bit behind on that, and we are expecting to meet budget for this year.
Okay, so that means that you're looking at another $52,000.
Yes.
Okay, because that hasn't happened in the past, so, but okay. The other question I had is that it seems as though there's line items that sort of disappeared. For example, there were several lines that were cut by 100% when you go down to general operating. Like, you've eliminated computer equipment, completely eliminated a line item for computer equipment. And I don't know how you've done that. And I don't know what medical fees and supplies are, but again, that has also been eliminated by 100%. So it must be someplace else.
So computer equipment is being centralized into the IT budget. As you'll see that the actuals in 20 and 21 were almost nothing and very small in 22. And so there had been some confusion with not just the city attorney's department, but through several general fund departments. Is that something that they should be budgeting for computers, for peripherals? And so we're moving those items to the IT budget. Medical fees and supplies, quite honestly, this is usually things that are first aid supplies. And I think when we ask people to cut, if people in the city attorney's office did not have any pressing needs. That's probably something that, didn't need to happen for this year, but may need to come back.
Yeah, I mean, it just, I guess it seems like when you do that, yes, of course, the percentage is gonna go down, the amount is less, but you're not really cutting anything. You're just putting it someplace else.
I don't know if we will actually need to spend that money or not. I don't think we have historically a very high medical fees and supplies budget. That is certainly not our goal. It is true with computer equipment. You are right. Those are costs that have been moved to a different budget.
Yeah, I mean, like you, and I don't know, I guess I'm just, I don't know, it just seems like, it's sort of like, I don't know, I mean, if the general overall, at the end of the day, if it's actually a decline to fill a gap, then I guess that's what it is. But if it's moving it from one place to another, then it's really not a decline. I guess is what I'm trying to understand. So I don't know where that is in the other budgets because I haven't looked for them. But it would be interesting to know where they are. If they're not here. And then the only other question I had is, obviously I'm assuming your personnel, your wages and salary line is going to change if there's no city attorney.
Yeah, there'll be vacancy savings for however long
that is.
Yep.
Do you anticipate if that were to happen that there would be a need to have further outside legal counsel?
We don't, obviously, it sort of depends. At this point, we don't foresee that. And I think we're, also hopeful that it doesn't go on forever. So, but we,
Let's hope not.
just from last year, I think, for a few months, it's fine.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you.
Question, please.
Yes, Councillor Jen.
All right, thank you. Yes, two quick questions, and I think one of them is for Justin and one for you, yours, Chad. Yeah, and my first question is specific to the line item, employee benefit recognition. And it seems it never existed in 2020, 2021, and for some reason we start seeing it in 2022. Can you explain what that is, please?
Yes, I can. That is, you'll see that in most of our department budgets. And that is a very small amount that department heads use. I'll say how I use it. I don't know how all department heads use it. But that's if we want to do staff lunches or a team building or any kind of money for any staff event throughout the year that is not otherwise covered here. I think most staff, most departments choose to have at least, one, perhaps a holiday party, summer party, something potluck, low key, but that covers these costs. And we have not always had that consistent across the departments. And so trying to make sure there's equity, I'm not sure why that was never in the city attorney's budget before, but you'll see that it is in most of our budgets. So we put it in.
Okay. But I mean, I feel like that this amount is a lot, basically. I mean, if we think about this, $400,000 for just recognizing some staff with events, and you also.
Sorry, Councillor Jen, it's literally $500 for the whole year.
Okay, thank you.
So yes.
Thank you. Oh, because
Yeah.
500.
Like a lot of the.
Oh my God.
Sounds
Thank
great.
you.
That was
Oh yeah.
You asked.
I got very hot in one point. Yeah, thank you. Yes, and Justin, I was just wondering also in terms of, staffing. I mean, how many outside of the city attorney's position, how many staff are you currently looking for, and how long those positions have not been filled, if any?
We are fully staffed.
Okay.
So we are lucky, very fortunate that 2 of the positions were filled in the last year, and we were lucky to have great candidates. And certainly we ended up with wonderful employees there. So no, city attorney is the only vacant position.
Good. Wonderful. All right. Thank you so much for being here and for the presentation.
Any other questions for the city attorney's office? Great, we will let you get back to your hard work. Thank you, Justin. And up next, Team Airport. Well represented this evening. Thank you, Nick and friends. I'm pulling up your PowerPoint. Apologies to those of you who realized that I did in fact post this presentation, but not in the exact right spot. So hopefully you had a chance to review it.
Can I make a quick intro while you're?
Please,
Perfect.
intro away.
Perfect. I just want to introduce the leadership team here. I know most of you know each other with Larry Lackey, our Director of Engineering, Marie Friedman, our CFO, Shelby Lozier, our Director of Ground Transportation. And I don't think many of them met Dave Carmen. He's our new Deputy Director of Aviation Operations at the airport. I did just briefly want to overview the staffing at the airport. We are almost fully staffed. We do have a couple of key positions that are currently vacant. Shelby's team does have some vacancies as well on the ambassador team. The maintenance team and the operations team, I'm happy to report, are fully staffed, which of course is a critical component to the safety and total operations of the airport. We have had a very successful year despite COVID, but there are some pretty significant hurdles on the horizon, especially with the fluctuation and inconsistencies with pending cases of COVID and of course travel circumstances. The good news is we are experiencing today, before even this current fiscal year ending, and expecting a moderate and somewhat conservative revenue budget for next year, knowing that our scheduled seats are higher than they have been in the last 12 years right now. This is you can see on the right hand side there a pretty quick chart. Blue is 2019 or that general fiscal year starting April 19, 12-month period. Orange is the pandemic when we first started there, and gray was last year up till March, just a couple of months ago. We are recovering, we're almost there. This is the basis of all of our revenue, especially some of our higher revenue sources. Parking garage, which is a substantial amount, car rental companies, and of course our airline, which is the highest amount. We are expecting still a year or two before we're fully recovered, conservatively. However, working with the airlines, that might shorten in time before we know it, and we're hopeful for that. Thankfully, the Federal Aviation Administration and the Department of Transportation have provided us a significant amount of federal funding, $20 million over the course of 3 particular grants to support our revenue losses because of those passenger losses. The great news about that is we haven't touched it all. We are still preparing for future challenges on the horizon, and we're holding some of that funding for future years in case the fall or another year is consistent with the orange bar graph there. Right now, our 2021 employments were down 83%, and our 2022 compared to the 2 years prior are down only 30%, so we're at that 70% mark. We do, like I said, we do have some vacancies on our org chart. Hiring is an extremely challenging operation right now overall. That's why I'm extremely thankful that we are mostly full on some of the key positions. And that's not just hiring for our internal team. This is across the board: airlines, ground transportation providers, restaurants, Hudson News. All of us are experiencing an extremely challenging hiring market, which is going to, in some ways, relate to some revenue loss, whether it's a restaurant that's not open because of staff shortages or other similar circumstances. This year, Larry has an incredible amount of capital projects on the horizon, some of the highest in probably a decade of the quantity and dollar figure of capital projects that we are currently moving towards, which of course requires additional staffing and Larry's time and his consultant team's time as well. On the revenue side of things, again, everything is highly connected to passenger travel. There we go. So blue is 2 years ago, orange is last year, and gray is our budgeted amount for this current conversation. You can see conservatively we are just about every single one of those are about 90% of the 2019 numbers, conservatively. You can see one of them in there, the gray and the blue line essentially match, if not just a little bit above, which is the rental car related revenues, rental car minimum annual guarantees are above. In our parking garage, I just learned today, we're currently at 105% of our revenue from 2 years ago.
Right, for this month.
For this particular month. And obviously that relates to our budget for next year. We're not budgeting that high of an amount, especially in the parking garage, knowing that there might be some very quick changes. This particular year, because we have received those 3 stimulus grants from the FAA, we also are budgeting $1.3 million for some of these expected shortfalls. We may not need to use those particular funds, but we're budgeting because as you'll see in the next coming slides, there is some decreases in the operating revenue, but overall, we are significantly higher on the total operating budget from last year, 2022, and slightly, I would say the same as our 2019 operating budget. When you include some of these other revenue sources, PFC revenues, which is passenger facility charge, a direct charge to an airline ticket purchase. Those of course are highly tied to the quantity of passengers. Really the big highlights for our revenue is our parking garage, budgeted at 5.7 million versus 6.4 million, which is pre-pandemic. So almost there. And our car rental concession revenue, which is this year budgeted at just over $4 million, which is higher than our fiscal year pre-pandemic number, as I indicated in the graph there. Maureen, you want to
Sure.
take it away
So
with the details?
this chart is an interesting way for us to analyze and us to share with all of you the revenues, both from what we're proposing for this year. You can see where we have the biggest gains to dollar changes from the budget that we have approved right now, the amended budget and the budget we're proposing. You see a huge decrease in the amount of the stimulus monies that we're proposing, and that's because on the top half of that grant, you're going to see those revenues that Nick has been discussing, the park garage and the car rental related revenues are really going up. Another thing I'm going to point out is we are having an increase. You'll hear this on the expense side in our QTA revenues. Our QTA is an acronym we use for a quick turnaround facility. And that facility is a car wash and a fueling and a quick repair for the car rental companies that are at our terminal. So what we did is we had built a brand new QTA facility, and it opened up in late October of 2021. So we have some increases. If we're looking at revenues over the years, you're going to see where we didn't really have any in 2021 and 2022. Now we are having some, and we facilitate, but we get back revenues from the car rental companies on that, either directly through the CFCs or we bill them, like in the case of the fuel, they fill up those cars, but then we do an allocation, we bill them every month 100% for what they're using. So you're going to see some of that. Another way we thought it would be helpful for you to be able to compare to 2019, so really pre-pandemic. So the chart with the little separation to the right is showing you that. Where were we and what was happening? So give you some perspective in just an overall viewpoint, because the airport has many revenue lines and many cost centers. Turn to the next slide. On the expense sides, so we did not reduce any of our positions. It's really essential what we do. Safety is always paramount at the airport. And it takes people to do that. And we really are not looking to cut services there. And the highlights, you know, where we're putting, especially now that our revenues are recovering, we always, again, are concerned about safety and improvements at the airport. So we put a lot of time and effort into thinking about preventative maintenance items, and keeping up the infrastructure that we have at the airport is paramount. And we don't want to come to you and say we forgot to do something. We want to be proactive. And so we budget accordingly, and we're always tackling those things from year to year. We always tackle something in the garage, for example. So we're trying to keep up our assets so that they're safe and can provide for us for the long haul. One thing I'm going to point out, because it's called an interfund transfer, and I have it listed on there. This is this year and last year we benefited from the fact that when COVID hit and Congress and the president signed all these stimulus packages in, one of the things that they did on the AIP grants, they made those grants, usually we have to come up with 10% of a local share. And they made those percents 100% federal. Not every one of our grants were 100%, but by and large, most of them were. So this interfund transfer is sort of like, what does it cost airport? What do we have to come up with to come up with our quote local share on these grants? So we're expecting 90% our future grants, we're going to start getting any day, to be 90% federal funds. Typically it's 6% state funds and 4% airport local funds that has to come out of our revenues. And we do get money from the state. They have been giving us, they used to fund that amount of the state revenues. They would give us the entire amount. And in the last about 4 or 5 years, they started limiting. At first they said, we'll give you $600,000. And now they give us $500,000. And I have to, unfortunately, it doesn't cover that full 6% of what we anticipate our cost is going to be. So you're going to see a huge increase in that one line item, which is probably overall driving the biggest increase to our expenses. And we have a lot of expenses we can't avoid. We have, you know, insurances and utilities, and we just have all sorts of things like that that are they're pretty well fixed. We do what we can. We're trying to get greener. We're putting initiatives in that. We're budgeting each and every year to look at that, see where we can make additional changes. It is important to us, and we know it's a very important initiative of the entire city leadership and all of the councilors. We know it's an important thing. So we are doing our part to always be looking at that and trying to make improvement at the airport. And in our debt service, we had done some refunding last year. We do not have a principal payment due on July 1st that we would typically have. It will return the following year. So we'll be funding it. We just have some interest. Next slide, please. So I've sort of described a lot of that that I just discussed, but here is our specific line items, and these are grouped together across all of our cost centers. So the largest ones you're going to see, and I've already tried to give some explanation to, is that QTA. I wanted to separate that out so that people wouldn't think fuel, what happened to fuel? We all know fuel is higher. Yes, it is higher for the airport as it is for every other department, but that fuel is, I've specified what we think we're going to be spending in fuel for the QTA. Because it's an in and it's out, it's actually really, it's budget neutral for me and for the airport, but it makes things look higher. Makes the total expenses higher, it makes the total revenues higher. So those are the biggest things. And then at the bottom there, you see that 1.5 million budgeted for interfund transfers down there. I just wanted to explain what that was. Next slide, please.
I just wanted to leave with this as well. This is of course, some of the raw data behind the employments over the last few years. That bottom line graph is incredibly important to the forecasted future of the airport. This is the scheduled seats as a percentage of 2 years ago or pre-pandemic. You can see throughout the entire pandemic, BTV, the yellow line, has been below the national average for the number of scheduled seats departing our airport. We just recently crossed that line in February and March of 2022, where we are now above the national average for the number of scheduled seats. Like I mentioned earlier in the presentation, we are at our highest scheduled seats for the next 4 months over the last 12 years, higher than the 12-year average. Our next 6 months, I think 3 or 4 of those months are higher specifically over this summer than the last, than 2019. And then the final slide is just a quick peek at some of the projects that we're working on right now. We are just kicking off an enormous amount of capital projects. Dave and Larry are working tremendously out on the airfield, which is incredibly complicated. Not to mention our $20 million terminal project, which is just over halfway done, I would say. And we're preparing to open that up in October with a new consolidated TSA checkpoint, which is depicted in that on-break picture. And we'd be happy to take any questions.
You talk about the city cost allocations. How does that present itself in these budgets?
So I'll take a stab at that, if that's okay. So on the expense slide, the one that looks like this, right? I actually have on there a line for indirect fees.
Okay.
So you'll see that on there. That is kind of all the services that we pay, that we receive benefit for, that are part of the overall city. You know, we don't have to come up and hire extra people to do those services for us. Things like payroll and processing our checks and all kinds of things. So that flows through under that indirect fees thing. We have other charges like for insurance or other things that much of that, we do have a separate policy for insurance and liability, but a lot of the rest of the insurances, we get economic gains because the city goes in as a whole. So because we're a larger pool, we get better rates on that sort of thing. So there are other ways that the airport saves money. And we try to if it's worth separating, we separate. So we don't see on that.
I'll just quickly add, so while this is an expense on our particular budget for the city attorney's office, for example, it should be a revenue on their line item. And we're working with many other departments as well to identify some other opportunities to collaborate to not only create a logical and justified expense for us to share with the traveler, but hopefully add a revenue source to other city departments.
Councilor Hightower, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that presentation. And I have some questions about how your presentation interacts with literally the bottom line. And so in 2020 and 2021, we logically took a loss. And so I guess I'm curious how that loss is being carried in terms of if it's debt burden and or if it like that was, you know, revenues from previous year that we had on hand. So I think if you could give a little bit more of an explanation of like where that loss is currently sitting. Yeah.
Sure, I think that lifeline for the airport because we are self-sufficient, creating enough revenues to cover our expenditures. Our expenditures, I should say, are very difficult to change whether we have one aircraft or a few passengers versus the amount of operations that we have today. That hole or that gap for our revenue loss was directly filled by the federal government with those 3 particular grants that we received, equating to almost $20 million. We didn't have to use all 3 of those grants just yet. In fact, Maria, correct me if I'm wrong, we are $4.8 million less budgeting those grant funds for this this fiscal year versus last year, versus 2019, which of course we didn't have any grants. So that really filled the gap so that there was no loss to the airport in any of the years for the pandemic.
Sorry, if I can just ask a clarifying question right quick before, because just want to make and again, apologies for not understanding totally all the background, but I guess because those are, if they're the grant federal non-operating CARES Act relief and non-operating CRSSA and non-operating CRSSA concessions, is that already captured in the revenues? Or I think I'm not completely understanding how they're both captured and then making up for that loss.
So these are essentially reimbursed. These are grants to reimburse the expenses that we need. So when we developed this expenditure budget, both 2 years ago, last year, and this year, we knew exactly how great the funding was needed to recover the loss in revenues, if that makes sense. So expenditures stay the same. We know what we needed to budget for the expenses over the last few years. We knew the loss of revenues that we were not going to receive over those same 3-year period. And we knew what that gap was to fill with these particular federal grants, which could be used for essentially any operating expenditure needed for the airport.
And I realized I cut you off, so I don't know if you had something to add to that.
No, that was it. Just essentially that these grants can be used for any operating expenditure that we require at the airport. So they are fully a reimbursement and a revenue source so that there is no loss at the airport.
You all set, Councilor Hightower?
Yes, thank you.
Councilor Carpenter?
Sort of in that same vein, this is maybe bigger picture. If you were to have an operating loss and we didn't have the grant funding, do you carry your own fund balance? And so if you have a profit one year and a loss the other year, you have a separate accounting for that you draw on?
We do. We have a couple of different accounting sources, and Marie can explain that much better than I can.
So we are essentially a business. We're an enterprise fund. We're a department of the city, but we don't get any general fund money. We don't get, there's no stopgap measure that if our revenues are too low one year, we didn't, for some reason, that we're gonna get any city tax dollars of any kind. That doesn't happen. So if we had a loss, that if we hadn't gotten that stimulus funds, it would have been really troubling for us, and our financial statements would have looked really horrible. I hope that answers your question. That didn't happen because we had those stimulus funds come in.
Why are you talking about like where we are with like these cash on hand and maybe that's been pandemic impacted with, but speak to that and also the airline.
Yes, so we got a couple great, excellent points. Many years ago, about a decade ago, the airport had almost no days cash on hand. And now we have close to 500 days cash on hand. What that represents, it means how much money do we have sitting in our unreserved, our checking account, essentially, the airport checking account that is available to pay those operating expenses. So it's a metric that we follow very, very tightly and very closely. It's sort of like the health How are we doing? And our cash situation is really solid, and we're very proud of that. We work very hard to manage that and forecast that and make sure that is a priority so that we're solvent, right? Because we're like a business, I guess is the best way to describe it. We have an airline agreement, which we extended for this year. And we're actually meeting next week with our airline partners, but we're negotiating a new airline agreement. There is a provision in that airline agreement. It's complicated, but there's a provision that our debt coverage score will be covered, and not just covered, our bond says we have to have 1.5% debt coverage score, just a accounting metric. But the airline agreement allows us to be up to 1.5, and they will fund that. So during the pandemic, because we had surplus monies coming in, the airlines were very much affected by the pandemic as well. We didn't ask them for more money, but we took a little less in our debt coverage score, but we are still way above the 1.25%. So we have a couple of things that we do in addition to just showing you our operating, and to make sure that we're healthy and to make sure that we're representing the airport, keeping us on solid ground.
I'll add just two more elements to that question. One is as part of these federal grants, we were also able to allow some of our concessionaires not to pay fully their MAG. These are some of them are small companies, so they did not have to pay us. The federal government was paying us a concession relief specific grant for those particular companies. I'll also add that a couple of years ago, we took out a revenue anticipation note of just over $11 million. This was before any of these federal funding opportunities arrived, and we were not sure what the FAA or what the DOT was going to particularly do. So that was another redundant stopgap between the airline, the days cash on hand, our reserve accounts, and of course, some of the expenditures that we truly were required to maintain.
Quick, interesting history here. I appreciate it. Councilor Carpenter, long work in finance. I mean, the airport went through a very rough period in 2009, 2010, when we actually defaulted on some debt coverage covenants. And coming out of that, that was when the credit rating was downgraded dramatically. Actually went all the way to junk bond status for the airport, and we built our way out of that by building up the cash on hand and putting in this really pretty tight risk sharing agreement with the airlines that should, in a situation like that, arise again. I mean, it got a little funky in the pandemic when the federal government was bailing out everybody, but in normal times, if we were to have a year where we're short, the airlines can help step up and pay a little more rent to help us get to the 1.5. And we work, on the other hand, we work with them very collaboratively if we're going to make the covenant ourselves. Instead of, we've been able to work with them and reinvest money into the operation of the capital as opposed to giving them rent breaks, and they usually work pretty well with us. So it's been a pretty interesting part of the airport's finances over the last 6 years. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Is that a common arrangement?
I think it's somewhat unusual. I don't think it was unprecedented, but I don't remember what.
Sorry, the question.
Risk sharing. How common is that kind of risk sharing agreement with the airline?
For a residual deal like this is what this is called, is a residual airline agreement. It's somewhat unique. There's definitely some very unique elements in our contract with the airlines, especially encouraging what's called low cost carriers to operate out of Burlington. But that risk shares is somewhat common in airports our size or like. And I'll add to our credit rating this year for Moody's, we maintained our credit rating, but we did bring it from an outlook of negative to a stable outlook, which was a huge win, I think, for the airport team.
Councilor Barrow.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions. The days cash on hand pre-pandemic, were they as good, or is the 500 plus days on hand you have now a result of some federal grants that you received?
It was relatively consistent, but I think some of that was related.
It's been very consistent. We've been able to maintain it and not really see a decrease in our cash that we have in our operating account. To answer your question, these stimulus grants, they're not money that they send like a lump amount of money, they're reimbursement things. So we only draw it down, we spend money and then we send them a request if we're going to need it. If our revenues are too low, then we draw down some of that money. So it's not like we have an influx of cash to boost it, and I think that might be what your question is, do we get it all and it's sitting in there? It's not.
Or some amount of it?
Yeah, so we've been able to maintain that and keep a balanced approach with our cash.
Okay, thank you. And my other question was around, and you hit upon it a little bit when you were talking about expenses, but the interfund transfers, I see it as a revenue line and I see it as an expense line.
It's a little confusing because we have some the interfund transfer expense here is just, there's not on the, you're not gonna see that on the revenue side, the same thing. That's actually, because it's more like a fund balance transfer, but we record it here and it's going to, the way we track our airport improvement grants, it goes towards those particular funds that are tracking those grants, so that it'll be, maybe $500,000 will have to come out and go fund a taxi project or something like that. So this is recognizing that we're paying these expenses and we're not getting there's no other funding source. This is our funding source is the airport. And let's see on the revenue side, because we do have something called interfund. So the interfund transfer, as you're seeing on the, is a different thing. Probably the name is a little confusing.
Yes, it is.
It is. I'm gonna make a note of that and I will call it something a little different. This is a part of that airline agreement would require that if our revenues are really strong in a year and we go above that 1.5 debt coverage score, then we are under the airline agreement, we need this to refund the airline. So it goes both ways. If we're under, they help us. If we're over, we reimburse them. We were over until the pandemic hit. And so each year we went back to the airlines. We have a majority in interest. We have a specific language we can go in and we ask them and they sign an agreement with us to let us retain that overage. So we kind of won, like it was a win-win for the airport. We said, we'll use it for projects that the airlines approved that benefit both the airlines and the airport. So that money that you see coming in as an interfund transfer is actually specifically that money that we could have refunded. The airlines could have required us to refund to them, but they allowed us to maintain it. And so we're actually spending that toward our terminal integration project that we are building, this huge improvement. If any of you've been past the airport or seen it in the news, it's very exciting.
Which of course the airlines are extremely eager to get going because that's gonna help their passenger.
Yeah. And that was a 90% grant. So that's funding our local share with the airlines. That's helping. Anyway, it's just a little explanation. You're right. I will make a note of that for next year.
That would be helpful because I
You wondered
use
what that was.
interfund as like
Yeah,
internal funds as opposed to.
great question.
Okay, I think wrap this one up.
I have a question, please.
Oh, sorry, Councilor Jang, I didn't see you had, go ahead.
All right, thank you. So a couple of questions, and I think the first one is if you can please explain as to why the debt service has dropped by 13% in terms of the expenses. And
I would love to. So every year, just like when you have a mortgage, when your principal goes down, every year you might pay the same amount to your mortgage payments, but the longer you go, the more amount each year your principal is coming down, and as you owe less debt, your interest expense is on that debt, that outstanding balance. So your interest expense actually goes down each year. So that is our interest that we are paying because our principal balance, we escrow
Recording
account,
in
and so our debt
progress.
balance is actually lower. So our interest payment is lower, and that's why it's lower.
Okay, thank you. And I think this is not like you did not refinance in order to pay less. No, it has not been. Okay, thank you for explaining. Now, on the revenue side, and expenditure side, we have a cross comparison of both 2022 and 2019.
Yeah.
But on the revenue side, we haven't seen the comparison of 2019 and 2023, basically.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't do that on the expense side. I did it more on because there's so many more accounts. Maybe it would have been helpful. I don't know if it would have been helpful.
I would say it wouldn't be as dramatic either from the expenditure side. While there were some decreases on the expense from 23 compared to 2019, the revenue side is where the massive change in revenue towards the airport was realized between 23 and 19. But we can certainly show that, but it definitely wouldn't be as dramatic or necessarily a large number. I think in fact 2019 was close to 19.
Okay. Sounds good. Wonderful. And this is not related about budget, but in terms of looking forward, I haven't heard anything about the airport that I believe that you guys were contemplating. What is happening with that? I mean, the hotel at the airport. So
Oh. The airport is doing very well.
Good news on the hotel, right?
Very good news on the hotel. Essentially the final permit zoning permit was just completed, and they have that in hand. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Right, so they have to secure the final Act 250, and they didn't finish some of the stormwater stuff because of the delays, because it would have expired. So they're going through that process now. Their goal is to start
Later this year.
Late summer.
Yeah. So of course through the pandemic it was halted. That financial element for their own funding of the hotel was delayed. Now that some of these final permits are being completed later this year, South Burlington is very excited about this as much as we are, and we're hoping to see shovels in the ground later this year.
wonderful. Thank you, guys. Thank you, team.
Great. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone else online. So we'll close the airport session. Thank you all. Thank you, good job. And next up, we have the Department of Public Works. Welcome. Thank you.
Right. Thanks for having us. Talk over the general fund portion of DPW's budget. You'll hear about DPW's capital budget here later tonight, and then water and traffic on Thursday. So you get a lot of.
Never enough, David, never enough.
There you go. Are we ready to begin?
Yes.
Great, we go for it. All right, thank you. We'll go through this quickly so we have most time for questions. We have a very broad number of budgets, and you'll see here the water and parking and traffic, and over $25 million of general fund capital projects, specifically in DPW's wheelhouse. And why don't you hit next? And we'll show a little how the four divisions break out. I failed to introduce the awesome team. Let me just say Lee Perry, Division Director, Norm Baldwin, Division Director, and Rob Goulding, Public Information and Customer Service Manager for our team. You'll see Megan and Jeff on Thursday. So as you'll see, if you can go just back one slide, the blue text here are general fund programs. So we'll be talking through three different divisions tonight. We have a whole host of assets, so I won't go through this, but fundamentally we spend 24/7 focused on making sure Burlington doesn't think about us when they flush the toilet, when they turn on the tap, when they get to work. A good day is a day that the public doesn't think about us. Next. We have a number of high-level budget goals. I won't read through them, but I will hit some highlights. The goal and the direction here was to maintain city services, and we have achieved that with this budget. Fifth down, we have a major new initiative this year, which is we heard from a number of counselors, concerns with wind-blown litter from customers, and that recycling gets damaged by it being wet and exposed to the elements. So we are proposing to use one-time funding to fund toters for every residential property in the city. You know, a number of counselors have asked for this when we've ratcheted down from 10 units or less to 5 units or less, and then duplexes. We just want to make this required. And one of the key reasons is employee safety. Lee's team has experienced over $200,000 of injury-related expenses from lifting from the recycling activity. So this one-time money is not only good for the community, it's good for our staff. We want to bring passenger rail back to Burlington. We've talked a lot about that. We're very excited for a July projected start date. And a number of areas here, there's more billable revenue for the general fund. And I want to thank Norm's team for digging deep and trying to focus more on billable activity. This will stress counselor requests that aren't necessarily billable, as we need to perform on doing a lot of billable work. Next. We are struggling, as other departments are, with trying to manage expenses. We are projecting an 8% increase in expenses. That's driven by 3 things. One is the toters that we just talked about, one-time funds. It's labor, and there's a number of subcomponents to that, and it's fuel. Fuel alone was over $225,000, in excess of what it was in FY22. That said, we are working hard to increase revenue much faster to have less of an impact on the general fund. So you're seeing that reflected there as well. Next. What are drivers on the revenue side? Jeff Paget, who's not here, has worked hard and looked at trend data, and we have restored the parking services revenue. There's parking and traffic revenue that's earned from the streets and the garages that go to special revenue funds. This is fine funding. So this is from municipal tickets, no parking here at the corner, meter violations, residential parking violations, etc. So we're proposing to return to 2019 levels. So City Engineer Baldwin is projecting to increase billable time for the general fund. Touched on that a little earlier. We've gone through all of our billable rates and increased them. Lee's increased his sidewalk production rate. We've increased our equipment maintenance shop rate. Those are things that are billable to either capital budgets or to enterprise or special revenue funds. We've talked about the toters already. Fourth to last bullet is just more billable time. For Lee's team, we are proposing 2 additional street maintenance workers who would be, whenever they're not plowing, which is 80% of the year, that they would be billable to Water Resource to do more enterprise support of our water assets in the right way. Thanks. On the expense side, you're seeing here the traffic and parking division have worked very hard to cost shift expenses away from the general fund and into the special revenue funds. Third bullet down, we did eliminate, or proposing to eliminate, a 3rd customer service position. It's vacant currently. And we believe with our new technological solutions that we can continue to serve the customers well with 2. And you'll also see here the fuel costs. You'll see the 2 additional street maintenance workers. That's the net cost. Once we get fully billed from Water Resource, we're going to have to purchase another recycling vehicle this year. We're still having to use a private hauler's trash truck on occasion because we don't have enough functioning vehicles. And we've slightly increased over time so that we can improve our winter maintenance. A couple other minor points we'll talk about there next. So challenges, I had understood councilors wanted to hear about challenges. I think there's a lot of ambitious revenue targets in this budget, and I won't mince words. Fully restoring our fine revenue, technical service doing more billable work, Lee's street team doing dramatically more billable work. So we're going to need to hit those budgets and monitor our performance carefully. So you'll see also the second bullet down, the number of large capital projects hitting the city right now is not to be understated. From the roundabout to the Champlain Parkway, wrapping up Amtrak to Burlington, the historic level of capital projects is intense. And we do have open positions. And so that is an area we'll get to in a second. So I want to thank the team that's working hard, and we need to redouble efforts to fill those positions. So you'll see here also, we did not get the full $40 million that we sought for voters. And so we are trying to write grants and find congressionally directed spending, anything we can do to meet the capital needs of the city, but being light on the taxpayers possible. All right, so here are the open positions. The ones in bold have been long-term or repeated vacancies. These are a number of key, many of them are frontline positions. We do have a couple of technical positions that have also been open. The large number of positions, second to the bottom, is school crossing guards. We have worked our tails off to increase pay, work with the school district to advertise, get parents involved, and yet we're still only about half full with crossing guards. So this remains a problem that we are facing. Next. All right, and just lastly, we really enjoy working as not just a department, but a partner in other departments' priorities. And we work across departmentally to achieve a lot for the good of the city. And at the end of the day, it's the work we enjoy. So thanks, and happy to answer questions.
Great, thank you, Chairman. Floor is open for councilor questions. Councilor Bergman, go ahead.
Well, thank you. I am interested in hearing more about the transportation demand management. I've sent this email to a number of people, but I'd like you to explain that. And within the context of this budget, my understanding is that DPW is supposed to be the lead department with regard to TDM, but I am not seeing that that's been fully embraced and it's reflected in this budget. So this is in particular concern to the North Winooski Avenue corridor that I am working very diligently with all of our departments to make a success. And if you could address that, that would be great. I would just add that in terms of transportation on that corridor, that parking enforcement, which is now a DPW responsibility, will be, I think, particularly important, at least in the beginning years of that transition. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Councilor Bergman. I will say, and I appreciate your communication earlier today, and some of the highlights that I had responded to are that we are fully prepared to comply with the council's direction in the resolution to work to find off-street parking for North Winooski Avenue. I personally am involved in a number of businesses and property owners trying to secure off-street parking. And additionally, there was a $15,000 dedicated from your council initiatives fund to support transportation demand management. We are ready to be a player in that. There is a question about how that money is allocated and who is going to kind of coordinate and manage TDM into the future. It is not an activity DPW has done to date. There are external partners such as CATMA, and that CATMA and Business Recovery and DPW need to continue conversations to figure out how that's being led. But we will absolutely be a partner in achieving the intent of the council resolution. And one of the things we had suggested, Councilor Bergman, is that the two put this on the agenda for the coming month, later this month, and that we can get into a more detailed conversation then about how we make sure we succeed collectively on this effort.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I would just ask that you get clarity in terms of your departments in regard to the TDM and the department that will lead that, because there seems to be a bit of bureaucracy at play that is not going to be helpful for us to succeed. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Bergman. I think you're planning a little further conversation. Other discussion? Other councilors, Councilor Barlow.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for that presentation. One of the things that I noted in your presentation is there's 2 new street maintenance workers. And with the condition of the streets the way they are, I can't imagine there'd be any time for them available even to work for the Water Resources Department. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on, I guess, the budgetary plans to handle the sort of, I wouldn't say it's unprecedented, but it's a large increase in the amount of street deterioration that we're seeing this year, and the inability of us to address it because of pavement costs, asphalt costs, and whatnot.
Great, happy to talk that through. I will say on the pavement side of things, we have experienced the freeze thaw over, my tenure here, these 8 years that are changing our pavings work plan as we see what streets do not survive the winter well. And we do have 6 miles of paving this year. This is one of our larger years of paving, 3 miles by us, 3 miles by the state, and next year with the state and city also doing additional paving. We expect a strong year. Yes, we are paying a premium for that paving. There is no denying that. These extra positions we were proposing would be billable positions to water. The amount of wastewater, sewer main cleaning, catch basin cleaning, these types of projects really are what water resource needs to preserve the water quality of the lake. And ultimately, we can't bring those in-house or propose to you to bring them in-house without earning the revenue from water to pay for them. So these really will be locked into supporting water. We've struggled to have additional general fund specific staff given the financial constraints.
Do you feel that as though, I know that there's certain streets that are scheduled to be paved, but there's a number of other streets that are in horrible condition. Do you think that there'll be you'll be able to staff to patch those in a way that they're
so we have the finite list that you're well aware of in terms of what we're planning on paving as a full redevelopment. We have set aside some funds, though it's very limited, about $90,000 to do what is not necessarily a full street redevelopment, but it is a section by section patch repair that goes beyond just Lee's team doing potholing, but to mill out small sections and repave some of those small sections to get us through the coming year, as opposed to just letting it be. And but that only goes so far. And so right now we're assessing where the worst of the worst is and how we can make the best use of that limited funds. It could be that if we identify additional funds with the fund balance of street capital, that we could potentially expand that scope of work further. But right now, we're just trying to put our head around what was not anticipated that failed when we developed the plan in January or March, actually. What needed to be done, what could be done to kind of get us through this next year. So there's a lot of thought going into that. It's not readily apparent to people, but we are trying to kind of fix those readily identified problem areas.
Well, if there's an area of the budget you can strengthen if 90,000 isn't enough, that's an area that I would appreciate some focus on.
Yeah, you're going to try to see what we can do.
Okay.
Any other councilors wishing to be recognized at this point?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Jang, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Chapin, and I could not agree with you that, basically your work touches everybody's life every single day. And most of the time, many people do not even recognize that until there's an issue. Just wanted to say that as well. And I wanted to understand, what will it take to add spring leaf pickup item within the budget? Because it seems like we do it in the fall, but in the spring, there are a lot of people who are asking for that service. And was just wondering, what will it take to make an addition to that specific item?
Certainly discuss what service level you would seek to provide. I will say that one of the things we are exploring potentially, and I will take your suggestion, is to get more leaves off the roads and off the people's property in the fall, so that we're not seeing that organic matter hit the lake and be a phosphorus load, is considering whether there should be a clean sweep in the fall. And we are having conversations with Water Resource about funding that, given that it's really a water quality benefit to the community. It would be an intense lift, right, as Lee's crew is trying to get ready for the plowing season. But water quality push and our increased commitment to the lake are starting to have those conversations internally, and we would expect additional money from water to fund that. So that's what we've discussed today, Councillor Jang, but we can bring back your comments as well.
Okay, wonderful. Because this is definitely a request that I've been getting over the years, that the city need to add that service as well, just like they do in the fall. The second question is specific to the original question from Bergman, Councillor Bergman. It is about the neighborhood traffic calming management. It seems in the city, if you put your request, you have to wait over sometimes 3 years or 4 years in order to get the attention that you need. For example, as part of this budget, do we have any opportunities to make leafways forward, or what will it take also to just take care of that?
You should see within the budgets, the transportation fund having allocations. For transportation program have allocations. Some of that allocation is dedicated to the purpose of dealing with traffic calming. We have in the last 3 to 4 years been in a process of trying to identify a way to make things quicker or faster for response. Part of that is to simply leave much of the decisions to staff in terms of, is this condition really require or warrant some action by the city? And that requires counts and so on and so forth. Some of what we're struggling with right now is, do we have enough staff to be able to do counts, make determinations? And we're, as you know, and was listed earlier, we were short an associate engineer. That associate engineer would help with that work to gather that data. We did hire a public works engineer to work more directly with this initiative, along with other transportation projects, and particularly making more permanent the greenways that are temporary in nature, to get rid of some of that urban blight that exists in and about these temporary installations. So we're trying very hard to continue to move forward with traffic calming in a more robust way, but these things cost a significant amount of money. As an example, we are also coordinating with our paving the traffic calming for Birchcliff Parkway. So that is a fairly large chunk of money within this fiscal year, part of next fiscal year, that's going to be committed to that purpose. But we also have kind of on an eyeball, the queue of projects that people are expressing concern about. So it's really a function of how much money and how much staff do we have to keep moving. But we are trying to reconfigure ourselves to do more, to be more responsive.
Pretty are underway this season. Norm referenced one. We're going to try to get more with our new staff person on board. It is an area where we would like to do more. And while we're trying to manage a historic level of capital projects, we are not able to do as much as we would like.
That's right. Mansfield Avenue is one of those traffic calming efforts as well.
I mean, the fact that taxpayers have to wait sometimes 4 years, and I feel like, sometimes respectfully, this should be a top priority. not new developments, but basically responding to the needs of the constituency should be the top priority from my perspective of the department. And it seems that next year and the years to come, it will just be exactly the same. But
No, I think in years past, the struggle was that building consensus within neighborhoods in terms of the appropriate solution and how severe the problem is has been what's somewhat been holding us back. I think even in conversation with some of the streets in this new approach, staff comes up with a concept, they don't like the consequence of that. As example, East Avenue, in terms of loss of parking with the proposed chicane plan, they weren't really receptive to that. So we have to kind of double back. So it's not just staff not committing enough time, it's also really are we getting proper public alignment about the choices that we're making and give them the best value for the work that we're talking about.
Okay, thank you. I mean, it's just that most of the time, you know, I am just talking with experience too. For example, Ghost Court. I don't know when those signatures was gathered, was submitted, and to date, the neighbors are still asking what is going to be done. You know, yeah. But thank you for your time.
Further discussion. Great, we'll take any questions from Zoom, so.
We'll see you in a little bit.
And we'll see you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Welcome, Mary, and to talk Fletcher Free Library.
Thank you. Good evening. Happy to be here today to talk about the library budget. When I have an audience, I always love to talk more about what the library does, but all our wonderful programs and what we do, but I know I can't do that today, so I just put up some pictures to remind you of all our wonderfulness and the great staff that we have. And the next slide is just really, you know, our mission, our values, our strategies. And again, I can't say enough about the wonderful staff that helps us to uphold these values every day. And before we get into the budget, the next slide is going to show something that we are very excited about, that we started as a pilot, and we have gotten the mayor's permission, and the CAO has worked with us to keep on funding our new North End branch. So that is very exciting. It started as a pilot. Burlington Telecom gave us the space. The mayor graciously allowed us to try this pilot, and it has been very, very well received by the community. So we are very, very grateful and happy that we are able to put it into the budget. So the next slide is probably one you're familiar with. Our library budget is fairly straightforward, and I would say it's also fairly constrained. The things that we have in our budget are basically to keep the library going. We're open 7 days a week, so our personnel costs are fairly fixed. Our utility costs are fixed. The equipment and maintenance we need to keep the building open is fixed. We have supplies and our services. One of the big part of that service line is our safety and our security that we use at our main downtown branch for most of the time that we're open. And our collection fund is the percentage that's tied into the property values as the tax that's on that. So that is fairly fixed either. So there's not really a lot that we can adjust. And for the purposes of the presentation, I did pull out just the general overhead that we're budgeting for that new North End branch to keep that going for another year. The lease, and overhead, utilities, and things like that. And there is an error on the subtotal and the total. Those should be $25,000 more. I apologize for that, but all the other numbers are correct. And on the next slide, the library really doesn't have revenue. We used to have fines, as you may remember, over a year ago, looking at it from an equity standpoint. Again, with the mayor's cooperation, we eliminated fines. So that was a revenue for the library. We do get some fees at the library for printing, or if somebody loses a book or damages a book, but it's not very much. And we do get an allocation from our friends at the Fletcher Free Library, which is our 501c3 nonprofit supporting agency. So we're very grateful for them because they also give us direct funding for our programming, for professional development, and for other needs that we have. You can see that on the pie chart on the right. And they bring in their revenue in a variety of ways through the annual appeal, through books that they sell. They've expanded their book sales now. They're selling finer books on eBay, and they also have an online store as well. So they continue to build capacity and fundraise for the library. And that's really it. It's pretty short and straightforward, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. So I'm just looking to see, looking at the bottom line, Mary, down to revenue and grand totals and expenses. So when I'm going back up and I'm saying, where did that significant, I mean, I realize that you're not a revenue driver, but, is there a reason why, with this grant system, state operating, just lose the grant?
So if that was, and you can see we didn't get it before,
Yeah.
that was an ARPA grant that came through the Vermont Department of Libraries. So, which was great. There was constraints to how we could spend that grant. They had to be on they were COVID related items. So we got a lot of furniture and fixtures and 2 hybrid systems like that through the grant for our meeting rooms.
Would have been nice to have had it continue.
Yes, it would. Well, we are putting in for another round. There's some more money left, and hopefully I'll be able to report some more if we get it next fiscal year as well.
Great. And then, I understand obviously you're very constrained in terms of obviously if you're open, you have to have personnel there. But I noticed under your general operating, you did make some adjustments. One of which, the largest one, was the special supplies, and I don't know what special supplies are. You went from a budgeted amount in 2022 of just under 67,000 to 4,000. So that's a pretty significant decline.
So that's that ARPA money, so the ARPA.
Oh, that's the same thing.
Yes.
I see, all right.
Yes. If I would have had my druthers, I would have loved to have had a separate line.
Yeah.
But Catherine's office doesn't like us to keep adding a lot of lines, so that's where we stuck it.
Okay.
But it should be a net zero between the two.
Okay.
Sorry, Catherine, you and your wonderful team under the bus. But it has, I will say, getting that ARPA money is wonderful and great, but sometimes the bookkeeping and the ordering has been challenging.
And then, okay, yeah, I mean, you're right. The CAO should let you have another line.
Yeah. No, you're gonna get me in trouble with Catherine.
So then now did you decide this year that capital leases are now going to be capital leases for property, not equipment, are now part of a line item? Speaking of line items, a line item by department, because now all of a sudden it's there. After not being there, it's now there.
That's the new North End Bridge.
Oh, well, that makes sense.
So that's
So
the
that
lease for
is
that.
something that, honestly, I don't know. I mean, it would have been pretty self-explanatory if it said property in the new North End.
Yes.
Then everybody would know what that is. I wouldn't even bother asking it.
Well,
Okay.
I think sometimes the challenge is and Catherine, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is they're trying to use codes that have been used in other
Yeah.
departments. So there's
I
not
understand.
always
So
that.
it's uniformity.
Yeah, it's not a great, sometimes apples to apples. That's not the right metaphor, but they want to kind of, sometimes we're shoehorning in a code that maybe isn't saying exactly what it should. And
Yeah,
that's
I mean,
that
now I
case.
know, now I understand it. I mean, that makes perfect sense, but it just was like property.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, no worries. Thank you.
Councilor Hightower, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I was like, what was my question? I just have a question about just because we've talked about other kind of downtown assets of the city. I don't know, I assume that the city owns the Fletcher building and just kind of if there's deferred maintenance that we're thinking about in terms of the building itself and how that's stacking up in terms of time.
Yes, I think that's a great question. It's 47,000 square feet. One big part of it is built in 1904. So I also think it's a very beautiful building as well. I think Martha's still there. I mean, we are on the schedule for different things. There hasn't been an assessment done since 2014. 2016, although because we're in schematic design phase, we are getting another building assessment done. So that I think will be informative as we move forward. But you know, my understanding working with the city is they do have that capital list and it's always kind of getting moved and triaged. So just try and work with the parties to see what needs to get done. I'm trying to think of what the last great capital project was the elevator. So we just had an elevator modernization done. And so, yes, we are on the schedule for a variety of things, but the order changes sometimes. Does that answer your question? I think she froze.
The power's on just for.
Yeah, there's apparently tornado warnings.
Councilor Hightower, are you back? Can you hear us?
Yep. She goes back.
Did you hear all that, Councilor Hightower, and did I answer your question?
Yes and yes.
Councilor McGee, go ahead.
Thank you. I just had a quick question. I saw that under employee benefits that parking was zeroed out for FY23, and I was just curious why that is.
And I did not do the benefits part of this, so I'm not sure why we did that.
That is a little bit of miscommunication between us because you needed to fill in the parking this year.
Okay.
So it appears we might need to add that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, yes, we will add that figure back in, but perhaps not at that amount. So
Yeah.
I will work on that. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Barlow.
Yes, I'm really excited that the New North End branch is continuing without interruption. I'm wondering if what the current service level is or the number of hours it's open weekly, and if that's anticipated to remain the same or increase.
So we also did receive funding to hire a part-time person out there. So we're hoping to increase it by a little. It's only a part-time person, so it's 16 hours now. We're hoping to maybe get it to 20 or 24. So looking at the hope is to look at our current staffing at the main branch and kind of figure out the best schedule to get those pieces working the best way that they can.
Great.
Councilor Carpenter.
I'm also undergoing a capital, or the Friends doing a capital campaign as well.
Well, we're not in capital campaign stage yet.
But is that something in your?
We're having a lot of discussions about it, I would say, right? But right now we are in schematic design phase.
Okay.
So the vision document that we had pre-pandemic, I believe it was 2018, is now going through schematic design. So honing in on a lot of the details and the particulars.
Very exciting.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Councilor Chang.
Councilor Jang.
Thank you. Yes, so Mary, thank you again so much for everything that you do. I wanted to circle back about your collaboration with the unions about the full-time or part-time position at the Fletcher Free Library Annex in the New North End. Has there been discussion? Because we just don't want, in the middle of the year, there are issues with them. Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't think they know yet that we put that position in, but, also we need the budget to pass as well, so I'm always put that caveat out there, when I put forth the budget, you know, the mayor's budget then has to be passed, so, but no, I haven't been in communication with them.
Okay. So my point being, it seems it's still not a full-time position there, but it seems that's what they've been asking for the New North End Library to have a full-time person dedicated to that space.
Double check, but I actually thought they were okay with part-time because they knew we were only open 16 hours, but I can double check on that.
Okay, I mean, if you say it, then I trust it, then that's what it is. But thank you again for your work bringing that. Thank you.
And just to clarify, Councillor Jang, that is a part of the process that, of course, HR will engage with union leadership as a part of the process. We just haven't gotten there yet, as Mary indicated, because that request is being made as a part of the budget process. We hadn't opened those conversations with AXME, but that would be the next step.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, you're all set, Mary, thank you. Welcome, Cindy. Go ahead, take it away when you're ready.
I gotta wait for the presentation to go up because Mary's been asking me the question, why do I have a picture of the library on the cover of our?
Yeah.
There I am. Mary's question was, why do you have a picture of the library on a BPRW presentation? It's a great question, and it's because we are more than Parks, Recreation, and Waterfront. We are also Capitol buildings, we are cemeteries, and we are right-of-way trees. So just a little reminder that we're very broad. And this is the elevator modernization that Mary was talking about. That's Kim Blakely on the left with the green sweatshirt, who's our public buildings manager. And they were toasting with not wine, not champagne, but bubbling cider, I believe, the finishing of that project. So that's why we have the library of our picture. All right, we're going to focus these next two slides on our revenue and expenses and the changes from FY19 to FY23. As you can see, we had a sharp drop in revenue starting in 2020 when we lost about 4 months of revenue, continuing down to 2021. That was our low. We had pretty much a full year of the pandemic. And we're starting to work our way out in 2022. You can see year to date that we're on an upward trend in revenue with still May and June ahead of us. If by some miracle we hit the May and June revenues that we received in 2019, we would hit our 2022 budget numbers. That's a pretty good reach right there, but the one piece that we are incredibly optimistic about, and here is your question, your challenge, see if you can figure out the answer to this one. Why are we optimistic for 2021 when we, or this summer of 2022 when we were not in 20 and 21? What is the big revenue driver for our department? I'll give you a hint. There's about 2 million of them about 2 hours from us. There you go. They can actually come across the border now. So we are much more optimistic for beginning to hit revenue numbers with that border open. I think it was 2018 is when we looked at the numbers of who comes to our campground and who comes to our waterfront. I may get these slightly wrong, but approximately, if I remember right, 1/3 of our users of our campground were Canadians. And it was either a half or 2/3 of our users for the waterfront. I believe it was 2/3 of the waterfront were Canadian customers. So we actually did a great job of making up the campground. I think somebody noted an earlier slide, oh, that was for the airport. People travel. We hit for the very first time all 50 states in Washington, D.C. at our campground. But the marina, it's pretty hard to make that up when people are coming across the lake. So anyway, we do hope to make that up, but noting as Chafin touched about in his revenue, very aggressive revenue numbers that we're looking at for 23, primarily in the waterfront. You can see the recreation facilities are in that same line that says recreation. They did pretty well. As far as recreation facilities, we could have easily built another gym, I felt like, out of the demand for our gym. But it's the Waterfront, very aggressive. A lot of that is parking. And my good friends at DPW, we are leaning heavily on, because that 16% of our revenue comes from parking, and we need parking enforcement. And that team has been really supportive of working with our team. We talked a lot about getting ready for the season. So again, we are optimistic for 23 as we get that enforcement going back again. We are looking at, with the support of the Parks Commission, adding parking fees back to levy from Memorial Day to Labor Day. And again, trying to find other new revenue areas that we can rebuild our the revenue for our department. Next one is our expenses. What I would like to say here to start is a big thank you. You saw a precipitous decline when it came to our revenue. I can still remember that feeling, and I kind of get goosebumps now thinking about it when I thought, how am I going to put together a budget for FY21 when we had such a precipitous decline in our revenue? I didn't know if I was going to have to find $1 million, $2 million in cuts, knowing how much revenue we were going to lose. But the CAO and the mayor quickly affirmed to us that we were not going to have to decimate our budget, even though our revenue was decimated. So I thank you. We did have some decline. It was a challenging year as far as seasonal wages. That first summer, we got our seasonal salaries back last year. It looks like that we're still on a decline when you look at the year to date, but let me just tell you that May and June are very expensive months. In 2021, we spent about $1.5 million with all our seasonal salaries, getting everything up and rolling for summer programs. So we will be going up. We won't hit our full 2022 budget numbers, but Catherine will be happy we aren't, since we aren't likely going to hit those revenue numbers, but I'm trying. We did have some savings on the seasonal, or full-time staff lines. But again, in 2023 proposed, while that goes up a little bit, that is primarily the COLAs, because we'll get into the cuts later. That's it for that. So staffing changes, we have a half-time custodian position that we are proposing going to full-time, helping us rely less on seasonal support. Part-time graphic designers supporting the marketing team. A central facilities project coordinator, we have about $4 million in facilities funds that we need to spend as part of the bond, and we need support in order to be able to pull that off. And then we have multiple grade changes to accommodate the complexity of the work that we have going on. And one of the questions was about open full-time positions. The recreation specialist position has been open for the year. That's one that was frozen the year prior, has not been frozen, but it's just been a challenge. We had a recreation manager position that we started recruiting for in September that would be hiring this person, and we wanted to wait, let them hire. Unfortunately, which is how hiring is, our top candidate ended up not taking the job. We had to start back all over again. Good news is we have an amazing recreation manager now, and they're working on getting that spec position going. That person focuses on outdoor programs. The HVAC technician was a position that was approved last year. It's currently been frozen as we get through this process, but we're really hoping that we can get that position back going up and running, because that one is supporting our fountains. And we may actually get that fountain out front going, is the rumor from our central facilities team. And the cemetery and grounds manager, while that's open, it's not been open long. It is a position that the person in it actually went to DPW, came back to, and then now is back to us. They decided they really did not want to be a manager and wants to just do on the ground work. So we're very happy that the individual, sorry, Chapin, ended up back in with DPW. So there's that. And so you guys asked the questions, what do we cut? Some things were easy. You know, we bought e-bikes that was in our budget for the urban park ranger program. While that's always fun to be able to keep that kind of expenses, that was an easy one for us to cut. But we made a variety of cuts. We took that very seriously, that this was our responsibility to the city. We had about $209,000 we were supposed to aim for, and across a variety of lines, we made some various cuts. I'd like to say a 39% reduction in telecommunications, because that was persistent dogged work on behalf of our team to track down all these phone numbers. My first time looking at phones, a very quick story, was when early on when I started, and I got a trip to Memorial to like get a tour of it, and maybe it was a year into my position, not recently. And I remember walking to Richard Bailey's old office and I picked a phone up and there was a dial tone. And I was like, oh my God, we're paying for this phone line. And sure enough, we were still paying for this phone line. So it's taken time to like just go into that. I've learned this loss prevention specialist is the name of that position that our city needs. And for things like that, so we really worked on getting those telecommunication line down. If someone has a cell phone, do they really need a desk phone? In some situations, yes, because they're customer service. So those are some cuts that we made. Many thanks to the CAO and the mayor and reached out knowing that we took this seriously, this work of trying to make some savings within our budget, and gave us the opportunity to bring to them a memo with some multiple one-time expenses, recognizing that there were some impacts to the work that we could do. And so we have brought that to the CAO, that list, and we'll see what gets funded out of that. And next slide, there's the challenges. One of the challenges is just, we've had this exponential increase during the pandemic of encampment sites. And it comes down to when they're at our parks, it comes down to our team to have to clean those out when people move or we move them out. And then folks are taken off of the regular work that they do. It's work that nobody feels good about doing it. Nobody likes doing it. It's, people recognize it's the work that they need to do. It's, you know, part of their work. But just wanting to put out there that that's a challenge. Again, nothing that anybody feels good about doing. Hiring seasonal staff, we joke that there is one place that we never have a problem hiring seasonal staff. Who would not want to be a dock master? You get a cool uniform, you get to hang out on the docks, and yes, you actually get tips. And I cleared that when I first found out when I came here. I'm like, can you really get a tip? Yes, you can. It's in the small amounts focus. So dock masters, never a problem hiring those, but there are people that mow and trim. It's been more of a challenge. We try to find creative staffing solutions. For example, I think it was Karen Durfee that I had not heard about this issue before, but for some people, there's a benefit cliff. You can get just making just that much, a little bit over, and you lose a lot of benefits. And so we're hiring our first person we're able to adjust the hours so that they don't lose their benefits, but that might mean working, 3 days a week. So we're being more flexible in how we do that. Somebody could work on the weekend, our cemetery staff are setting up a space where people could check out the equipment, their employees, check the equipment out and, work on the evening or the weekend to try to get more support. And then another challenge was just balancing through the reductions that we were asked to do with the 10% increase in utility costs. And that's just from increased facility needs and then just increased utility costs. And just a final piece I made as first on this last slide was just a thank you to staff. It has not been easy. It's not been easy for anybody across the city. Leadership team, the department has just stepped up time and time again with different needs that we've had and working with their staff. So we've got Sophie's here. And then I know Derek was going to be available by text if needed. He lost power in Colchester. Melissa's on vacation, but I'm not sure Gary and Aaron are hanging in there. But many thanks to all of them for the support that they give our department and then our larger BPRW team. And welcome back, Canada was my final comment. And I don't know if anybody has any questions. Or no, where are you at?
Councilor Barlow and Councilor Carpenter.
Thank you for that. And thank you for all the work you do at Parks. I had a question about the Urban Park Rangers. Like, what's the status of the program?
I'm so excited
What's
because I
the
can
timeline?
finally tell you we hired our first person. Neil started this week. Actually, I get to meet him on Thursday, and then the next person starts next week. So we finally have our two. That's why they were not on that list of open positions. Finally. So they'll get started. What part of they have to do is we're building that program. So you won't see them out in the parks, turning around at a dime. Just as the CSOs had to get trained, we've been training our urban park rangers build the program. But we are excited. It sounds like Neil, who's our lead urban park ranger, even though he's not on yet, keeps emailing Alec, who oversees him, just because he's so enthusiastic about getting this program going with just different questions. And some of the pieces that we really look for in the candidates is just different skill sets such as around mental health, working with people out and about in our community. So we are excited about getting that up and going. And I know it's been a long, slow process. I appreciate everybody's patience.
Do you think we'll see them this summer?
Oh, definitely, definitely. Yeah, the park rangers, it was another one of those ones that was another second round. Our first round just took a long time to get through the whole process of, your post positions and how long it takes before you finally get interviews. That our top candidates who have found their position. So we went around again. So they will definitely be out there this summer. The goal would be Memorial Day weekend is we'll have you at least to see a sighting. And I have to admit, I can't wait to see the field. Aaron does a great job of clothing. I've seen the hat, and the hat looks really cool.
We have worked for them at Letty Beach this year.
Yeah.
We've done
Oh, yes.
numerous fireworks.
Well, I want to give the PD some credit because Aaron and Alec have both noted that the CSOs have been out and about and been very supportive. It sounds like they put out a lot of flyers at Letty already. So they're very supportive, and John will have his, Chief Mayor, I should say, will have his Beach and Parks Patrol, the yellow shirts will be back out again this year. So between the CSOs, park rangers, and the Beach and Parks Patrol, urban park rangers and CSOs, we should be much better shape than we were last year. Since you figure those are 3 that were not there last summer.
The follow-up, that is great news. On the parking, will the kiosk have to be in by
Our goal is July 1st for the kiosks at Letty. We've got the 2 identified.
Okay.
And so it's more a matter of figuring out how we're putting the in with helical tiles. It's it seems like there's this logistical, like how do you install a kiosk using helical tiles? But we did just get the one in at Perkins, where last year we had, because we had to remove the what do you call that, the little house there.
Yeah.
The little hut, we had to remove because of the realignment. We were on Perk Mobile last year. We'll have Perk Mobile and the kiosk. They got the kiosk in just off this morning.
So will it be Park Mobile?
Park Mobile and kiosk at Letty.
Okay, and the gate?
And the gate is, they're working on, and the gate is like a little Achilles heel for me. The gate is there, and the Urban Park Ranger program is going to be maintaining the gate, but when they went to go do it, it sounds like they didn't have the right keys, so they reached out to the company that installed it, and right keys for them. You're welcome, but we have that, gates are also on the list of, that was a reach for the unassigned fund balance, but I'm trying. For Oak Ledge and North Beach also, because we've had a lot of complaints, especially at Oak Ledge, with people coming in at nighttime.
Go ahead, Councilor Hightower.
Yeah, and this isn't a specific question, it's just a comment. I'm obviously very, very supportive of parking and paying for parking, as well as, like any changes in boat things and things like that. But I just, yeah, I think just want to make sure that as we're adding charges, it's great that, our Parks Department has so many different recreational activities that can act as a source of revenue, but also just continuing to make things free or near free across some of the lower income things, such as the rec leagues and things like that, just so we're not reducing access for that, even as we're continuing to improve and bolster our parks. So again, I didn't look at like an exact breakdown of like where those revenues are coming from, but I think just my plug for keeping equity in mind when we think about those things.
Great, thank you. And I just want to reinforce that we do still have a strong scholarship fund, and Bernie Pummel, from what I understand, just confirmed recently that his donation of $25,000, which is split between BCA and Parks, he'll be renewing that again this year, which helps to bolster our scholarship lines.
Can you send us information on that?
On Bernie's scholarship?
Well, just for generally, if we have a constituent like low income and feels they're not getting access, is how we
just have them reach out to us.
Okay.
They also have to do is we make it really easy.
Okay.
And we do low income parking passes, where they just get a free pass, they just have to ask.
Okay, that's what.
Yep. Thank you.
Councilor Jane, go ahead.
Thank you, Director, for being here. And I was wondering, as part of your budget, what are some changes or allocation to accessibility issues, especially to the lakes?
Yep, so as far as access, the Oak Ledge will be open this year for accessibility. Letty is the one I know that everybody's been asking about, and that's gonna be part of our, we're currently in the middle of the comprehensive plan for Letty, and that is one of the key things that they're looking at is access. Not just at the lake, but also around the whole park. How do people move around the park? And then also at which, there's kind of two ramps down to the beach, which is the one that's the best one to focus on for increasing accessibility.
Right, and this is a general comment about, all the presenters. I'm so glad that the voters did not approve the tax increase, and it seems that you're all figuring it out. Thank you all so much.
Is there any further questions online? Doesn't look like it. No further questions in the room. So thank you, Cindy.
Yep, thank you. I'll be back in a short period of time.
Welcome back. I'd like to make a introduction.
I would, excited to be here and introduce Ashley Parker, who's my replacement. So Ashley started last Thursday and we jumped right into the budget with her. But Ashley wants to say something.
Yes, my name is Ashley Parker. I am coming to you from, I was working in the city of South Burlington doing projects. So that's where a lot of my experience is coming from. But I'm also a resident. I'm really excited to be here in this capacity, and I look forward to doing more work for you and with you.
Thank you. So it's actually a really exciting year this year because I don't have a PowerPoint for you. I have a URL that has a new software that we are implementing for capital, which addresses some of the issues that have been in our audit findings previously, our project accounting and our transparency. So this, you all got some updated PDFs, but it is a URL. At some point it will go live. It is interactive, and so it has in it the list of all of the projects. It has pie charts that talk about what percentage, and if you actually roll down to one of the pie charts and roll over it, it would let you, are you in a PDF or did you go to the URL? I'm in the PDF. Oh. That's what I thought you told me. Okay, so the URL. Okay, so the URL.
Look as fancy.
We would need you. Thank you very much, I appreciate that. You can, you'll be able to punch on it and it will let you go to the report that actually gives you the details of how it's being spent. And so you will be able to see all of these, and it's really sort of fun. And if you go down, it has like the construction portal is on here. So you can hit on the picture to the, go down a little further. And it will show you the construction portal, and then you can hit on it and go to it. And it shows you what's going on. So right here, the picture is actually a link. And when you hit on the picture, it'll take you there. And so it also does, each of the different departments did their own page. And so there is a tile that allows you to go to each of the different departments and see what they have for their narrative on their projects for the year. We have included this year in the capital budget many new things. We have public art, which became an ordinance last June. We have the tax increment financing, so your covering both the increment side with the related costs and the new downtown Main Street Great Streets project for construction. So that is in here. And we also have the American Rescue Plan in here. All of these are being managed with projects as per the audit had asked us, so we can run reports on all of them to be able to show how they're being utilized and where the money is going. And we can reconcile it much more easily. So I'm really excited about that. It's a $44 million budget, which is larger simply because of the addition of these different things. But we are going to be able to show you in a much better format what we're doing, why we're doing it, what the needs are, and move forward from there. And there, I believe you have this with a list of every single project is on there. The implementation is still in process, which is one of the reasons why you've got a PDF. One of the challenges we found is the naming conventions is that what pulls through in the software is actually what New World says because it's integrated with New World. So we are learning that we need to be a little bit better when we name our projects in New World. We don't just do them as an accounting name. And so, for instance, if you look at under the American Rescue Plan, it has the shelter pod. Well, that's really our homelessness initiative. And so it's misleading, but when we set up the project, we set it up as the shelter pod, so it reads that way. We're learning how to rename projects in New World, but it is a learning process, so it's still in that implementation phase. We are also, this will allow us to forecast. So we will be putting in the next 5 years into this. And so you will be able to see the overall need of every single asset class. And it will help us in making our strategic decisions because we'll be able to see the overall need in the city. I actually showed it to the airport tonight and they're very interested in joining in and using this also. Water and traffic has shown an interest in using it. If we can pull it in, then the city as a whole has a much easier way of looking at what its capital needs are for their overall infrastructure. It includes our fleet, the 3 new fire trucks, public safety infrastructure, which is the new radio system, which is the police and fire handling, project management. It has Parks, Rec, and Waterfront, which Cindy will speak about in another couple minutes. Councilor Hightower spoke about facilities. It does have facilities in it, and there was $4 million in the new bond that went to that. Very honestly, with the historic buildings we have, 4 million will not do everything that we need, but it is a good start, and that's where we have to prioritize each year what we do. It has street capital, greenbelt, conservation legacy, bike path maintenance, and then all the public works projects. And Norm, would you like to speak about the public works?
Yeah, so one thing worth noting, there's been a lot of groundwork in the last year or two, particularly about how projects are budgeted and how it's structured moving forward. One of those things we moved from was fiscal year accounting to life cycle accounting, and there was a significant amount of refinement in terms of the general ledger accounts to really get a greater level of detail for the accounting purposes that Martha referenced. This year was significantly different for us in the respect that this budget represents the additional ask. So, for example, for projects that had funding were in years past, that money that was carried forward is not represented necessarily as additional ask, it's already in place. So what you'll see is projects that are asking for funds this coming fiscal year, and I can walk through those if you'd like. And then there are projects that are underway that already have funding and not asking for additional funds themselves. So I can go through that list of projects and you can certainly ask any questions if that's all right with the council. All right, so the projects that are asking for additional funds, street capital, that's kind of basically a reoccurring, almost operational little capital budget that relies on tax base to fund. So each year there's a new ask. So that is going to be a reoccurring ask in every fiscal year. Of particular interest this year, paving, we're looking at almost $2.5 million worth of paving itself within the city, use of city funds and various sources, and street capital, general fund capital, V-Trans grant money, water resource money, and then transportation capital. In the 23 bond, it was noted that sidewalk is looking at $900,000 for sidewalk work to continue that effort to stay on pace with the investment in our sidewalks. As you all know, Parkway is in a stage of getting underway for construction, and it is anticipated to begin this June, and will be really work in earnest this coming fiscal year 23. And then what is an additional ask here is the 2% local match that I referenced in previous conversations. So shouldn't be anything new there, but just worth noting. Intramural Road Side Path is a great opportunity for us. We've talked many years about trying to improve pedestrian access along Intramural down to the Intramural Center. We were successful in getting a grant of 80% state, 20% local match. That is $1,452,000 project that is at the very start of almost kicking off. And there's been a lot of conversation, obviously, about Main Street grade streets and the significant reinvestment that will represent for Main Street itself. That design and permitting for that is ongoing and will continue to potentially summer of 2023, and hopefully begin construction in fall of 2023. So, and that project is expected to be about 2 seasons long. University Place, this is a kind of a thing for me. Is, of course, I'm a UVM grad, but I also have a daughter that's going to UVM, so I'd love to see University Place get built and rebuilt to actually be there and present when she graduates. So that is an exciting thing to happen. It's been in conversation many years, different administrations and different university leadership. It's finally underway. Projects that don't need additional funding is a Rail Yard Enterprise project. At this stage, we are in the process of trying to work through the federal process of selecting a preferred alternative. Last year, we had a cooperative agreement in place. The state and federal government has agreed to a $20 million maximum budget. Anything over and above that would be on the city. That is, again, favorable to the city in that respect. It's 80% federal, 10% state, 10% local. You're probably familiar with this, was the South End coordination schedule of design will begin potentially in fall 2023. We'll complete the selection for alternative and go to construction in 2025. That project is trying to work in coordination with a number of projects in the South End. One of those that's currently underway is Shelby Street Roundabout. We would hope that within the next year that the Shelby Street Roundabout would be complete and allow space for the Parkway to begin its work along the High Street corridor. And also continue to coordinate with other things like state repaving, water relining, so on and so forth. Some smaller projects that you've probably seen before through contract approvals. Mansfield Avenue Side Path has been awarded. That also is not just side path development, it's also traffic calming for that street. One really small project is the Lake Street Side Path, which is basically extending their sidewalk system from Lake Street, connecting into the Waterfront access north, the Lake Street extension. Right now, there's no sidewalk that connects across the rail crossing there. And so my team's working on developing a safe means to walk and cross there. And last but not least is North Champlain Street. Nicole Loesch, who unfortunately left our team and is now working in CT office, had been advancing that in cooperation with Corey Gibbs, our civil engineer, senior civil engineer. And at this stage, we're near term going to be beginning construction in short order. So a lot of work going on. I would note that with all of the projects that have been funded it is going to be a challenge for us to advance all that's being asked of us with the staff that we have, but we're gonna make it work. So a lot of good things in place. It's nice to be back into the situation of being in the office.
So you brought up a couple points that hit me really good, which is the grants director did start today. So that's one way we're going to be able to leverage our dollars. We have $4 million we set aside of the new bond that was for leveraging and match. So she started at the same time last week, the state approved their budget. So those two things tie very strongly together. There is literally millions of dollars available in that new budget that we are going to be looking at. So that's a really exciting thing. Yes, he's challenged for resources, but we have availability and the opportunity for leveraging our dollars moving forward in that way. You spoke about the projects that don't show up on here, and next year with this program, we will be able to see the historical projects, and if there's a carry forward of project, it will show up. But with the new program just beginning, we had to pick a start time, and so we don't have historic data on the previous ones that are in there. One thing that is close to your heart, Counselor, is the accessibility. And there was $100,000 that was approved in the fiscal year 22 budget. That money has not yet been spent, I have to say. And so that is still out there. And I just want to let you know it hasn't been lost and it hasn't been forgotten. But it is still there. So wanted to bring those points forward that we remember.
Great. Questions for the team? That's Marlon, go ahead.
Yes, I just had a question about the bike path or the Greenway relocation project. Is that all paid for already in the current budget? I don't see it in this capital plan. I don't see it in the presentation.
You're talking about like path rehabilitation, so the only
Relocation on
The
the waterfront
relocation
within
on the
the
water.
previous year budget.
Okay.
Yes. Excellent. And Norm is processing paperwork, received the last invoice that was 1,300 and how many pages?
1,324 pages.
So Norm's gonna lose his eyesight here. And
Yeah, that and kill trees, I don't know when.
There's still one more thing left on the bike path rehabilitation, which is the North Beach Overpass Bridge. So that is still out there. And one of the programs that is coming up is for bridges that are not on state roads or on any accepted road. There is a program with a no match program for bridges. And so both that and the Rock Point Bridge qualified for those programs. And so we're hoping that we can apply for both of those bridges and get the funding for them.
We've also had some damaged bridges that need exigent repair. One of those is on the belt line and the other one is Queen City. So there was funds within that 23 budget that needs to be applied to that. So that's also a focus of ours.
Software is exciting. I'm not sure what you're more excited about. I'm not sure if you're more excited about the software or the fact that you seem really happy.
Almost like
I'm tired. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It was sort of like, this is it actually.
Yes, I'm really excited that she's here.
Yeah, I know, you seem that way.
But I want her to be successful, and so I'm gonna be here to help her be successful.
You've been a great asset to the city, Martha. Thank you so much for all your years of devotion to bringing us to the point where we are. Thank all of this. Thank you.
Well said, President Paul, I agree. It's been, it's exciting that this position that we created early on in administration because we weren't getting these capital projects done. Mark's really changed that and decided to have Ashley step into the role and continue that tradition. Any further questions on this item?
And may we have an audit find, may we not have the audit finding? That would be, yeah. be excited. Don't worry, they'll find something out.
So, good, we'll close out this item, and that brings us to, thank you all, and I think brings us to our last presentation of the night, the capital budgets for the Parks Department. Welcome back, Sid.
All right, Sophie's coming up to you.
Welcome, Sid.
All right,
So,
you guys, I
Sophie
think
is
you're
back in the
all
room.
set. What's that?
You were welcoming back the Canadians earlier. So
I'm doing advertising. You're doing advertising. I'm gonna say we should get, you get a commission for all your relatives that you bring down.
Yeah.
I think you've all met Sophie before. Sophie's our Parks Comprehensive Planner, and joining me today. So we are jumping right in. You can go right to that first slide. We are going to go through our various dedicated funds and bond monies that we have coming up. So we'll start with a penny for parks. Most of you know that that was a vote by our voters in 2008, and that's up to a penny to be used for the improvements to parks and community gardens. We're excited about expanded funding for that as we realize that full penny. Multi-fiscal year projects that we have going on, and then upcoming new projects. One of the things you'll notice is playgrounds. We spent the past 2 years really focusing on compliance with our playgrounds to make sure that they were safe. Sometimes that necessitated actually removal of a playground, like you might have seen at Letty and you saw at Oak Ledge. Other times staff could do some fixes to just ensure that slats were even, replacing whatever was broken so that we had safe places for our kids to play. And now we're really starting to focus on the replacement of those playgrounds. We have Oak Ledge and Callahan coming right up. We'll be doing a top lot at Pomeroy, Smalley Park Playground, and then also one of the ones I missed on there is Champlain Street. So again, focus on our playgrounds, and as part of the bond, we got approval for more money towards accessible surfacing. So we hope to be doing about 1 playground per year to ensure that they have accessible, that's the port-in-place surfacing that will be going in place at the Oak Ledge Playground. And we're sort of not definite yet, potential for that Champlain Street Playground. And most likely the next one would be out at Letty. So we have that type of surfacing out at the north end also. It's expensive to do. We can't do it in all the playgrounds, but it is something that we want to try to focus on getting done at least one playground per year. And the other one that we had additional bond money for is for comprehensive plans. We're guided in a lot of the work that we do by these comprehensive plans. We'll be touching on my picture, not quite yet, but my picture is for North Beach. And these, improvements we're doing at North Beach are based on the comprehensive plan that was done in 2016. We just wrapped up Perkins Pier and Callahan Park for the comp plans. That's a lot of the work that Sophie's been doing. She's got Letty in the midst of it, and Roosevelt and Battery Park are next. And again, that just helps us guide smart decisions as we go do these capital investments in our parks. And the impact fees, just a slight note on that, is that we've not really seen a whole lot of impact fees recently, but we look forward to those growing again. And this is Champlain Street Park. This has been an internal project that's taken us a number of years because it was impacted by COVID. We got started on it, and then we had to shelve a few projects early on during COVID, but we're really bringing this one back. Part of it was just staff capacity. And this is a very tiny little park that's on South Champlain Street. If you go by it now, it looks slightly better because Nate, one of our park commissioners, led some volunteers there, and they pulled out a bunch of the shrubbery and such that have been growing on the fences. But this is a design. We've been working again internally. Max Badalinsky, our parks project manager, put this really cool concept together based on a lot of community input on what we'll be doing to that park. So this is the wandering walk, just down to the south of August 1st. So you went to August 1st, went south.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Max did in his drawings is there's an apartment building that exists to the right. Right now it's an empty lot, but the planned approved building there is a very tall building, just as tall as an apartment building. And so you can't quite tell from this picture, but he's actually shown where the shade will be from that building. So it's going to be very like a tunnel type of park, but it has this little tiny sliver of view out to the lake at the very end of it. So that's our South Champlain Street Park. So next one is our bonds and V-Trans projects. We have one project that's for V-Trans, that's the Shipoleti Park CP Smith pathway. That one will be a multi-year project where anything with V-Trans takes a lot of time. But it is underway. Max is overseeing that one and making good progress on it. That's right, that's the next picture, it's the North Beach Fulton, it's the next picture here. So we are doing our final design and permitting for FY23 for the North Beach pull-throughs, and that will get done in FY24. The challenge for that one that we'll be planning for in FY24 is that it's a construction project in the middle of campground. So we're gonna have to really figure out the best time to do it. We might do some closing of the campground midweek in the fall or something to try to have the least impact to the revenue to get this really important project done. One of the ones, just to touch on there, that is upcoming is dredging. I know nothing about dredging. I'm learning about dredging. So luckily the state knows a lot about dredging. LCT, our good friends over there at the Ferry Dock Marina knows about dredging. So everybody's educating us so we can learn about dredging, because the last time we did dredging, which I guess was about 13 years ago, the method that we did it then is definitely not what we can do now for dredging with the state and permits. So we're learning a lot about dredging, but we hope that by the spring we can, we'll have our permits in place, design done, and do that first round of dredging. Next slide.
What is Star Farm irrigation?
Oh, sure, that's the irrigation of the field, athletic field there. If you've, I don't know if you've been out on it, but it's super dry and sandy, so that's the plan, is to get the irrigation in that athletic field. So here's the design for the North Beach pull-through. It's really exciting, but you know why? It's because it's new revenue. There's nothing there. There used to be a barn. We took that barn out, and again, this is part of the design that was done with the comprehensive plan. Big, large RVs come in now, big trailers. The current design of the campground does not take into account large vehicles. They squish in next to each other. We will charge premium pricing for these. RVs can pull through. There's water, sewer, electricity for them. And obviously one of the big things we had to take into account there is stormwater. So there's stormwater plans for all of the improvements that we're looking to do there. So anything that I missed with that?
Well, it's also improving the circulation from the high school, basically, our entrance into the park down towards the beach, which currently doesn't have a sidewalk connection. So it'll be a lot safer for pedestrians too.
Oh, that's great. You got to add that, get that done with that first part.
Oh, hopefully.
I think so. That'd be great. That'd be great. And then one of who knows what is special about North Beach this year? Anybody have a guess? Guess. This is your quiz. I give you guys quizzes.
Canadians.
Yeah, the Canadians. Well, there's Canadians are except for we here. We got all 50 states last year. We did great in the campground. What's it special? It's an anniversary.
Which one?
Which one?
100.
Yes. 100 years of a campground at North Beach. And the other thing that most of you know about me is I love to camp. And I've camped in many, many states, and I primarily stay at public campgrounds. Our campground is amazing. It is incredibly unique to find a campground in a city that's wooded by a beach, a lake, 5 minutes from downtown, and a freeway that runs through it. We have prime real estate in this campground, but we have to invest in it. It is old, it is tired, and super excited that the voters passed. This is the first step to get this in place, and I will be coming back to you with hopefully permission from the mayor and the CAO. I think I did a little seed planting at one point about this one, is that we were hoping that we will be able to negotiate some sort of deal that we could put a percentage of the revenue from that new revenue into capital funds so that we can continue to put money into the campground, because right now there's no funds to put into it. We do small amounts depending for parks, but we really need more dedicated funds for the campground. Greenbelt Capital, how many people saw the Stockton, Vermont video? Did anybody see that yet? Oh, Rosa, I texted it to you, so of course you saw it. So hopefully you have to go see it. It's amazing. It's a Stockton, Vermont of our trees team. Those guys are phenomenal. It is just a really, really great video on the trees team. So Greenbelt Capital, that is the portion of the street capital program, street tax. I gave myself notes. Street capital tax. We get 0.5% for that one. Right away, plantings, trees is what that's funding. VJ is going to continue focusing on the emerald ash borer management. He did a lot of inner plantings. Any chance that we have to take trees down. So we're doing work in a park where there are ash trees that are already failing. That's a great time to take them down because there's a good chance that we'll eventually lose them anyway. And fall 22, spring 23, the focus will be out in the new north end with all the plantings. He did about 400 trees they planted this year in our right-of-ways in our parks. He focused on wards 2 and 3 and then some on the south end this current fiscal year, looking at where we needed, where we were the lowest in our canopy. And because obviously out in the new north end, it's not lowest canopy out there, but we have a lot of ash out there. And they continue with the street tree pruning cycle. Urban Forest Comprehensive Plan, that has been something that was COVID impact and just pure capacity impact. But hopefully now with the fact that we're wrapping up the bike path, get the playground done, that we've got a staff member that'll be able to focus on getting that Urban Forest Comprehensive Plan done. It's old, it's outdated, it needs to get updated. And we'll be most likely working with the Conservation Board. They have expressed some interest in working with us on that and helping to fund that too. And then we have a proposed horticulturist position there with a focus on green stormwater, again with some increased funding in the female capital that we are anticipating. They will start, that position won't start until spring of 23 because they're working on saving some money up for replacing one of the pocket funds. Open Space Conservation Legacy Program, that's one which is again was established by the voters, approved by the voters, established by council. That was 2004 for the purchase and protection of important natural areas and open space. So that's another one up to a penny. Hoping to realize full funding for that program. The team right now focuses efforts with the Burlington Wildways. People are familiar with that, partners with that coalition, the Newsky Valley Park District, Intervale Center, and the Episcopal Diocese. And just we've got a variety of projects that we work on as part of the Wildways, which includes some wayfinding and branding. There's a trail steward program, non-native invasive plant internship program, and then they have their city nature celebration event. Another area that our team focuses on with funds through the legacy is conservation education. Dan does a variety of work with a variety of different age groups. They have some active curriculum development with the teachers at Champlain Elementary and the Edmond School. They've been doing some mini plant nurseries out there with K-8. With the high school, they have an active partnership with the City and Lake Semester Program, Resource, and BYCC. For higher ed, we work with UVM and the Rubenstein School of Environment. We've got summer interns, and then the work days for the UVM Upper Bound program is how we serve higher ed. And then continuing ed, we have the Master Naturalist program. So that's all different age groups that we're working with for education on the conservation end. And Dan has more partnerships than anybody I know in the city. It takes longer for everything because he works with so many partners, but in the end, you get a community that is more connected to our land. So Dan really does a phenomenal work, really partnering with folks in the community. And the next picture just shows a picture that's one of the classes with UVM Rubenstein program doing some work at Fletcher. Next one is our bike path maintenance and improvement fund, and this is another one that's overseen by our conservation team. They have ongoing projects that include that year-round maintenance of the Greenway corridor. That's in the spring and fall, spring through fall, that's mowing and trimming. In the winter, this is the plowing and the grooming. They've been focusing on areas of erosion where emergent stormwater issues have arisen after we've gone through and done this big improvement project. And then every 2 to 3 years, they're going to do striping, fogging of the bike path, and resetting the sides. So we're really working on, which I'm actually, one of the things I really like about that OpenGov, I have it on a spreadsheet, but it'll be nice to put in OpenGov, all those costs that we need to take into account, the striping getting done every 3 years, the fogging, et cetera. So that's really going to be great. And then wayfinding and signage is another thing that they're working on. I am incredibly excited that we're going to start seeing signage at Arms Forest. And then we're also working on signage on the bike path around ethics and rules, kind of safe speeds and such, which actually was something we've been working on, but it also came through as a community request as part of our Penny for Parks program.
Okay.
What's up?
There's been quite a bit of interest in that.
Yeah.
So.
And it has been, yeah, and we have a draft sign that's been, that Diana did, she was running it through local motion just to get their final input on. They've got really, they do bike ped. So they're gonna give us some input on that. And then we also have, she's working with an illustrator to do a fun, like almost like a pop-up temporary kind of thing on bikes and just use, so it's just fun, goofy kind of pictures. I hope I get people's attention, like, you know, the dog on the leash, you know, on the line all the way across the bike path that says like dogs on leash, things that people actually will pay attention to. We'll have the, we don't want to call them guidelines as compared to rules for the Greenway. We'll have those up, but I think these other more fun things are what actually going to catch people's attention. I'm not sure the diet where she's at, but I know she chose an illustrator.
Yeah, I don't have that.
Yeah, but that's the goal is to get that out this year. That's just a picture of how beautiful Greenway is. Next up, essential facilities, as I reminded you, that is part of our world. We have upcoming projects there that are all being funded through the bond, including some multi-year projects. I have to pick one that I'm excited about because it's all part of my role is Lakeview Cemetery Office. If anybody's seen that building, it's falling apart. And then I had one more picture of the library because I forgot that I already had that picture of the library. We get to see those folks twice. And that's just last one here is the donations and grants, just kind of a reminder that it's not just tax dollars, but we also try to get donations and grants for projects. The Letty Paws Place is one we're looking to get that project done this year, and that is through the Parks Foundation. Redstone Cottage renovation at Keesler Park is going to be funded through legacy funds, donations, and a grant from PHCB. Oakland Universal Playground, that's Penny for Parks, that's fundraising, and that's also Landmark Conservation Fund grant. And then bike park design at Letty, where they're working on conceptual plans. We got Penny for Parks request that came in last year, I think that was around the design work. That group to Burlington Bike Parks putting up some money, and then we received a $50,000 program grant. So we try to make sure we're not just tax dollars. And that's the end of our presentation. Right.
Great, thank you, Cindy and Sophie. Questions? Marcus, go ahead.
Just have one question. It's about the, I think I know the answer.
Okay.
But the Letty Pavilion that we discussed for a couple of years.
Yep, so that is, we have held money for it. And again, part of the Letty Park comprehensive plan to figure out where's the best. We've done it 10 now. Is the 10 up? Haven't been down that far.
It's supposed to be up at least for the first week of June.
First, okay, because we're doing the tent up again. It had good success. We thought that would be fun, good to try and pilot. It made a little bit of money at the end to pay for itself for putting a tent up. We'll do that again this year. But that's one of the big parts of that not one of the big parts, but one of the parts of the comprehensive plan is where's the best place to put it. But we have $100,000 set aside. I think we pushed it to 24 is when it's on the list for. But we have whether or not 100,000 will cover it. We probably have to do some fundraising.
So it's sort of on hold as the comprehensive plan is underway, and once that's complete, it'll be integrated with that.
Exactly, to understand better where it should be and what we need to connect to it in terms of access and all that.
Which is the reason we chose Letty for that next comp plan, because we have a playground on the plan, we had that water, that shelter came up, and the restroom needs to get fixed up. So that's when we realized, oh, wait a second, and we've got the bike park. It's like, that needs to be the next one. Let's make sure everything's in the right spot.
And working together rather than always being kind of going in.
But I imagine it's gonna need a fundraising, depending on what we end up deciding we are. Shelters, again, we have 100,000 set aside.
Good, any questions online? Like it, so going once, going twice. We are adjourned at 7:09, and we will
See you here Wednesday.
Same back.
Do it all again.